The following program contains an all-you-can-eat philosophical buffet. If you suffer from mental indigestion, Randall may not be right for you. Check with your gastronomist.
Proclaiming the truth in the highways and byways of the world. Fighting for justice in the dark alleys of politics. Raising the voice of resistance to a fevered pitch. And he knows where to find the best and worst jail food in America. Randall Terry.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, fascist. You don't even know what that word means. But I still love you, and I want to teach you all about fascism. Today's top stories: $75,000 a day for Obama and his family. And Russia is melting down, literally. And President Obama tries to meet with Democratic gubernatorial candidates. I'm really busy reading my phone book tonight, Mr. President. This and so much more. We're going to look at the history again of World War II. You're going to love it. But first, a word from my good friend, Joey, the hammer.
Lies, lies, lies. This is what we hear from Obama, from his administration, day and night. I have a proposal. We should put them all under oath before they open up their mouths, because then we could get them for perjury, and then they would be in here with me and not out there plaguing the rest of the good people of America. Maron.
Welcome to today's program. Oh, we are going to have a program literally for the ages. In fact, you might be watching this in an archive. It's that good. It's that important, because we're going to talk about how and why the religious right has collapsed, failed, been miserable for the last generation, the conservative movement as well, and what we need to do to get it back. We're going to look at one of the greatest heroes of the last century, Winston Churchill. But first, let's go over today's news. The Obama administration, well, they're on vacation. At least the family is, and they're in Spain, and it's costing American taxpayers $75,000 a day. To which I say, who cares? You right-wing people are pathetic. If you are making a hullabaloo about the fact that it costs $75,000 a day for Obama and his wife and his children to be in Spain, this is what I have to say to you. Shame on you. If President Bush and his family were on vacation, would you be witching then? Would you be saying, oh, look at this? This all comes from the egalitarian, jealousy, socialist nonsense that we should all be equal. Yeah. No, we shouldn't all be equal, because that's not the way God made the world, okay? And whether it's the President of the United States who's a Democrat or Republican, they go on vacation, it costs a lot of money for security, okay? President Obama is the leader of the free world. Strike that. President Obama is the leader of our slave plantation. And he's got to be protected, darn it. He is the president, okay? I don't care who's in power, they've got to be protected. Stop whining about this and move on with the things that matter. Like Russia. They are in a crisis right now. They have got incredible fires raging. Some of these fires are getting very close to one of their key nuclear facilities. They could have a meltdown that causes Chernobyl on a factor of 10. Plus, there's a heat wave in Moscow where thousands of people are dead. And there are people that are saying that it might exceed the biggest heat wave in all of history, which happened in 2003, killing over 50,000 people in Europe. The simple thing I want to say is this. We need to pray for our friends in Russia. This is bad, bad, bad news for them. And one can only imagine the grief and the heartache that many families are going through at the loss of life and the danger that they are in as these fires rage out of control. Finally, the President of the United States. Oh, this is funny. When he went to Texas yesterday, and he tried to meet with the Texas gubernatorial candidate, guess what? The Democratic candidate was too busy. I love this. But guess who was waiting for him at the bottom of the tarmac? Yeah, that guy, Rick Perry, the Republican governor. And Rick Perry gave him this. Well, actually, not this. I have the original. Rick Perry gave him a copy. It was a letter saying, President Obama, hello, are you there? We've got gang violence spilling over the borders from Mexico into Texas. We need federal help. 286 federal officers on a 1,200-mile border isn't enough. Do the math. One guy per 4 miles. Right. Doesn't work. Also, recently, the president tried to meet with the Georgia Democrat gubernatorial candidate, who was also too busy. This is getting funnier. It really is. The Republican wants to meet with him at the bottom of the tarmac. They get 1 minute together where he says, hey, come on, I'll meet with you again. Anytime you and Napolitano want to come down here, let's visit. Let's talk. Let's talk about protecting Texas, Mr. President. I want to say this about that. President Obama, his numbers are in the tank. He can't even get a meeting with the guys that he's trying to raise money for. This puts the I in embarrassing. Wait, embarrassing begins with E. Not if you're Obama. But beyond that, listen to me. This is where we fall, year after year after year. Everyone is upset with Obama, rightly so. And what are they going to do? They're going to run like political empty heads to the Republicans. And you've got the religious right clapping, going, oh, yes, we need to go for the Republicans. And the pro-lifers, go for the Republicans. Stop. Go for candidates who are worth a darn, who are committed to principle ahead of party. Don't give money to the Republican Party. Analyze the people that are running and learn from the lessons of Churchill in France. We're going there next. I'll be right back.
Why is it that when you have been looking for something for hours, you find it in the last place you look? Could it be that it's because when you find it, you quit looking?
Moments with Moses. There shall be no cult prostitute of the daughters of Israel, neither shall there be a cult prostitute of the sons of Israel.
Welcome back to the program, friend. Yesterday, I talked to you about the problem we have in religious press, pro-life press, conservative press, where many of them have become pom-pom wavers and partisan cheerleaders that only want to make us think that even horrible defeats like Kagan getting on the Supreme Court is actually a victory. It's disgusting. And I've had it. The time for this charade is over. So yesterday, I introduced what for some people think are fairly harsh words. Please hear me. When Jesus overthrew the tables and chased people with a whip, when he said, whitewash tombs, you travel half the earth to make a disciple, and when you do, you make him twice the child of hell that you are. Those were harsh words. The phrase, what would Jesus do, became very popular a few years ago. I think there are times that Jesus would do and say things that would alarm a lot of us. So if we want to be like Jesus, which we should, remember what he said, if you cause a little child to stumble, it would be better for you that a millstone was tied around your neck and you were drowned in the sea. Jesus loves the little children and drowns their adversaries. It's one of my favorite verses. All right. I left off yesterday comparing Churchill's words about Dunkirk and the fall of France with the drivel that we're hearing today. And I quoted to you from an article from a fellow named Steve Urtelt from lifenews.com. Go to the site, check it out. And by the way, he's welcome to come on the show anytime he wants to dispute anything I'm saying. You're invited, Steve. So I wrote to him in really plain, strong language, you know, like the Lord used against hypocrites and those who want to hurt children. I said to him, among other things, for you to say that Kagan's victory was a positive thing or a silver lining was an evil beyond comprehension. For you to try and do anything other than tell the truth about Kagan's victory, that it was a horrifying victory for child killers, shows that you are a fraud. I told him he was a collaborator with the child killers, that the elevation of Kagan to the Supreme Court was like the fall of France to the Nazis, that trying to give Kagan's victory a positive spin was like whoredom. I urged him to read about the Vichy government in France that collaborated with the Nazis from 1940 to 1944, hoping that he would shudder for his sins. I want you to remember something, people. Collaborators were hung after the war as traitors. See that picture with Hitler and that man? That man is Marshal Pétain. He was the French leader during the occupation. He was sentenced to death after the war for collaborating. He only got to live in prison the rest of his life because de Gaulle commuted his sentence. Yesterday we talked about the English sinking the French fleet. Now this is the point I want you to understand. Listen closely to me. The French, when they fell to Germany, rather than take the 400 pilots that they had, that were German pilots, by the way, that the English had shot down defending France, rather than take those 400 pilots and give them to English so the English could hold them in prisoner of war camps, they gave them to the Germans so that they could fly more missions and kill British soldiers and maim civilians and children. And then the French agreed to give the French fleet to Germany. Not to England, to Germany. And this meant that these ships would be used against England. Now, the British said, it's not going to happen. We will not let this happen. So they began to capture them, to disable them, and even to sink them. In one engagement alone, over 1,200 French sailors died. Churchill said he had nightmares about this for the rest of his life. Now, there are many of us who say, I don't want to speak against fellow Christians. I mean, we need unity. We don't want the enemy to see that there's division in our ranks. Listen to me. You cannot put unity ahead of truth. You cannot put unity ahead of justice. And most importantly, you cannot put unity ahead of the lives of the innocent and the slavery of all of us. Senator Lugar from Indiana, Lindsey Graham, Senator Snow up in Maine. These are traitors, people. They're traitors to God, to liberty, and to the lives of the innocent. And they have to be identified as such. And when a pro-life group or a pro-family group says, these are our friends, these are our allies, we need to support the Republicans, they are becoming collaborators with the enemy. Now, there are people that say Kagan's election or elevation to the Supreme Court was a teaching moment for all of us. They're right. When we come back from this break, I'm going to show you what we learned. And the lessons are not good. Don't go away.
All right.
A traitor like he is?
Lena Kagan. She's a baby killer of the first order. A little more, oh
It is a fine thing to be honest, but it is also very important to be right. Sir Winston Churchill. Welcome back to the program, friend. My goal is to turn you into a thinker, not someone who can parrot what the left wing says, and certainly not somebody who can parrot what the right wing says, but for you to be anchored in truth and be able to think a thing through logically. And then once you can think, to act, to be a bold and brave culture warrior in word and in deed. And part of what that means is that we have to abandon pathetic, failed gimmicks and tricks and trite little that are done to keep us active and make us feel good, like sending tea bags to the White House, sending red envelopes to the White House, sending voided checks to the White House. Please. We need people to do and say the things that women's voting rights activists did, civil rights activists, those who fought against child labor. That's the lesson for victory. And however distasteful it might be, we must root out compromise, treachery, collaboration with the enemy in our midst, whether the aid to the enemy is by word and deed or by silence and inactivity and fear, hand-wringing, or by deceitful propaganda and pom-pom waving masquerading as news. You know, there's a passage in the Bible where St. James admonished us. He said, "Cleanse your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you men of double mind. Be wretched, mourn, weep." He said, "Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy be turned to dejection or to sorrow." We're in one of those moments, people. We're losing the country. We've got to grieve. Now, with the Kagan teaching moment, I propose to you that we use Kagan's victory as a teaching moment and have Churchill as the model. What did Kagan's victory show us? Kagan's victory showed us how desperately weak the pro-life movement has become. Kagan's victory showed us that we have leaders who don't lead. Kagan's victory showed that we have 501c3, tax-exempt ministries, churches, organizations that prey on people's hearts and wallets about abortion, liberty, Second Amendment, the family. But then they do little or nothing to defeat the hardcore proponents of the very evils we say that we're against. And they don't even mention Kagan by name. Don't tell me that you can fight someone like Kagan and never say her name. And that's, by the way, if you don't know, that's what the 501c3 tax exempt status is all about. You cannot electioneer. That means you can't speak the name of the bad guy. You can't say Obama's a bad guy. You can say certain people who may or may not be running for office at this time in history don't support all the things that we support, so you may not want to vote for them as a result of your moral stand, but we can't really tell you what to do. That's not fighting. That's equivocating. It's blather. Kagan's victory showed us that our priests, our bishops, our pastors, our evangelical superstars will do little or nothing except sit on the sideline while someone like Kagan rises to the Supreme Court. Kagan's victory showed that our pro-life Republicans, like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, are basically, forgive me for saying it, political pimps and whores. They use us. They use the babies. They use traditional marriage. They use lowering taxes to get our money, to get our votes, to get our volunteer time. And then they run for the hills when it's time to really fight, to protect the babies, to protect our liberties. I mean, sure, some of them voted against her, but they did not expend the political capital to try and filibuster and to stop her for a variety of self-serving, cowardly reasons. Let's see, what else did Kagan's victory show us? It showed us that we have pom-pom wavers and deceivers as analysts and bloggers who pretend to be news sources and leaders, but are actually propagandists. Friends, I am done with this charade. I fear God too much to participate in this deception. And in eternity, should I see the millions of souls sent into eternity by the abortionist knife, I don't want to hang my head in shame because of the things that I didn't say or that I didn't do because I was too darn interested in money or good press or my reputation or not hurting people's feelings or protecting the honor of my colleagues in the pro-life movement or in the media world or in the Republican Party. I don't want to hang my head in shame because of anything that might have tempted me into silence and inaction. I would rather follow the example of Jeremiah the prophet or Winston Churchill, who boldly told the truth even when it was against members of their own religion, even when it was against members of their own political party, because those great prophets put life and liberty and truth ahead of all else. I got to take a break. I'll be right back. In return for my love, they accuse me, even as I make prayer for them. So they reward me evil for good and hatred for my love. Friend, usually I quote one of our founding fathers, but I think that it would be appropriate in this show for me to quote Winston Churchill. Churchill said, "Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Hitler knows that he will have to break us on this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will say, this was their finest hour." If we are going to prevail in the culture wars and get this nation back into the hands of righteous men and women, we are going to have to embody in our words, in our actions, in our prayers, in our sacrifices, the words that you just heard from Winston Churchill, because everything else up until this point has proven an abysmal failure. Let us fight like it all depends on us, and let us pray like it all depends on God. And with that spirit, we will prevail. God bless you.